Hello, everybody. Anne Sansom and I are here. Very privileged to be introducing four remarkable poets who, as you know, won our book and pamphlet competition last year and judged by Romalyn Ante and Jonathan Edwards. They did a great job choosing four really distinct writers, equal weight and experience, I think, in the way that they deal with the world through language, but completely different. And it'll make for a, well, we know it makes for a marvellous reading because these four have already read at the Wordsworth Trust together in person back in March. It takes a long while for the collections to be put together and got ready for marketing and so on. So although they've known they've been winners for so long, it was a long time before the collections came out. We're really glad this online launch is going to happen. And tonight we have, as you know, Karen Downs Barton, whom Anne will introduce in a moment, John Miller, Zoe Walkington, and Luke Samuel Yates. They're all waiting ready to read. Okay,
so we'll start with Karen Downs Barton's collection, Didikoy. And we're very happy to say that it's the PBS Summer Pamphlet Choice too. I'll just say briefly what we know about Karen, but it's better when she's speaking for herself. Karen Downs Barton is an Anglo-Romany writer who, after a peripatetic childhood, including times in state care, now lives in Wiltshire. Didikoy offers a window into the colourful, precarious world of a multiracial Romany family and focuses on characters at the often untold margins of society. Blending lyricism with formal experimentation, these poems explore what it is to belong. There are some really lovely comments by two fine women writers on the back, Sarah Wimbush and Ella Duffy. Sarah Wimbush, part of her comments are courageous, haunting, and exquisitely appliqued with the musicality of her own Romany identity. And Ella Duffy says, language becomes an act of courage and reclamation in a collection which both moves and electrifies. So be prepared to be electrified by Karen. If you'd like to start now, Karen. Okay.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Peter, for having your faith in me. And I'm really looking forward to reading. I've heard everybody else read, and you're in for a treat tonight, everybody. So I'm just going to start my clock because I'm a stickler for trying to fit as much as I can in. I'm going to start tonight with a poem I don't usually start with. And it talks about erasures, and it's an erasure poem. And to give you a little bit of background, it comes with an epigram by Geoffrey Summerfield. And he says, I regret the omission of women poets in this book. This is simply due to the fact that Britain in the past 15 years has not produced a woman poet of real stature. It's written a while ago, as you can tell. And it talks to me of erasure, the erasure of female poets. But what struck me about it was it also spoke of my own erasure. My history was pretty much hidden from me. And when I was in children's homes, as you've just heard Anne talking about, I met a lot of young ladies who went on to live very precarious lives. And this poem is dedicated to them. So it's talking with a mouth full of stars. You do not see me, grow stones at the edge. Imagine this midnight moment. Look across the ruddled city. In the corner, a dove shot down. I thought I was tough. Lop head stiffens. And that's an erasure from a single page from the anthology where Geoffrey Summerfield made that comment about women. That's my comment to him. The next poem is one that talks about my mother, as a lot of the book does. And as some of you already know, this wasn't the book I was supposed to write, I thought. I was very late to education because of my background, and I was about to take an MA. I was sitting in the audience on a night like this. I don't know whether you can hear, there's a thunderstorm in the background. And one of the people who was delivering a speech to us all, Celia Brayfield, mentioned a book that she'd just written about authors, female authors, and somebody in the audience asked, well, why did she give up? It was such an amazing book. And Celia turned around and said, because she was a single parent, and she needed to do what she had to do to put food on the table. And that comment changed everything for me, because while Celia was talking about the male bastion of printing and all the rest of it, and I was thinking about my own mother, who in her way did what she had to do to put food on the table. So this poem is for my mum, and it's called A Love of Flesh. The morning after a night caller, Mum would pay the rent and put cash in the meter. We'd have crusty rolls from the corner shop that filled the flat with the yeasty warmth of just baked bread. Divvying them between us, she'd cut each cob, showering flakes, then slather them in butter. Sitting with a quart of prawns before her, Mum would peel their chitting skins like translucent baby toenails, suck clustered orange eggs from their abdomens, shock their bearded heads to sip their brains of salty thoughts, then tuck their naked bodies into the beds of our waiting rolls. Saline, sweet, and yielding. The next poem is one of a sequence of poems titled Dear Faye, and part of the book is talking to my sister about the things that were erased from our backgrounds. Quite often she didn't know things that had happened, and she was told that they were something else. For instance, when I went into children's homes, she would be told, oh, Karen's on holiday, which it really wasn't a holiday. And so I wrote a series of poems talking about things that happened in our past to share with her, to help her to understand where we both came from. And this is one of them. Dear Faye, ask me about the day we were caught stealing in Auntie Barbara's dining room, her posh flat on Streatham Hill. Ask me about our guilt as horrified faces peered under the lace-edged tablecloth and saw an open box of dog biscuits between us. Ask me about the bone shapes that smelt of Farley's rusks, arranged in coloured rows on paper doilies. The pinks were a disappointment, like blown rose petals. The blacks etched our teeth and taste buds with the grit of fire-grey ash. And for those of you who haven't seen it, on the Poetry Business website, there is a really interesting blog that uses that poem. And so I'm kind of dedicating that to Chloe and Em, who did an amazing job of trying to dissect the poem and understand where it came from and where it was going. And it's really interesting, check it out. The next poem is a sequence of poems about being in state childcare. And it was a bit of a culture clash the first couple of times I went away. I found it so different. It was a real shock to the system because we did things very differently at home. And as you'll hear, it wasn't always a success. So, Majelapan, the rules of hygiene. In state children's homes, clothes you arrive in are taken away for washing, and you might never see them again. The prefects collect clothes in plastic baskets, ovals big enough to take a ride in, skidded across the linoleum landing. Boys force each other's sweaty heads into piles of knickers, scolded by laughing nurses. New children who ask after their own clothes are teased with tales of gifts to jumble sales, burnings in boilers. But if you were sent to the caretaker's office, he'll let you watch machines churn clothes in greyed water, spot your waving jumper and kicking trousers. Your waving jumper and kicking trousers decorate bushes far from each other, a windy wash day beside Nan's Vardo. You learn what a Romany child should know. Separate clothes by body parts, top half in white bowls, bottom half in blue. Sprinkle fistfuls of snowflake soaps. Swirl the water to blizzards. Scrub, wring, rinse, wring. This Muckaday law shapes rituals of cleaning. Nan's bowls are emptied according to function. Cleaner water near kitchen shrubs, where fennel, mint, or lavender are gathered. Bottom half water is slushed in dishes. Raw hands washed to touch the bunched clothes, cleaned of their grey swill. To touch the bunched clothes, washed in their grey swill, the caretaker uses calipers, hoiks steamy meshed arms, legs, bodies to tumble dry. Mist sighs from a drooping proboscis hanging at a part-opened window. Dust lingers on clothing, skin. I imagine him as a dung beetle with pincer mandibles, rolling shitball clothes. Under the motto, personal possessions breed discontent, I practice the pretense of interest in the wonders of his washing machines. I'm looking for the clothing I arrived in. It won't be stealing. No one here wants to wear the clothes worn by a dirty gypsy. And the words that are non-English were bardo, which is a caravan or wagon, and they're not where most people live who are Romany background, but they're quite often kept for going away, travelling, like everybody else does, and sometimes for seasonal work. And mokaji and majirapan are just the names for hygiene rules. So I like writing sequences, as you might have noticed, and I'm going to read you two from a sequence, just two parts. And if you want to read the rest, buy the book, of course. And this again talks of my mother and how she put food on the table. Of the men who came as shadows in the night. 1. I didn't tell you that I remember splinters of your father, his charry skin, fingers with nails of polished wood, his calypsos and dark beauty, how on Palace Road I played with his children. I didn't say I remember him as a form brewing beyond stained glass, his threats or entreaties, while he taught our door to buck against its hinges, his unhinged kicking, shouldering, lasting and lasting, before disappearing into the black silence of his lost battles. Why conjecture about his imploded world, the wife and sons who left him, or the role our mother played, you growing inside her? But I told you that you were wanted. That's the thing you should remember. 3. Do you remember the stealthy men that knocked at night? Whispered negotiations, the metal rasp as the chain slid, the door opened, or when they slipped that other world to shadow our days. They worked in shops Mum scurried past, leered from corners, or spilt like stale beer from pub doorways. Some spat remarks she'd do her best to explain away, And always, at that stage, we'd move on to some fresh place, new start. That was the start of the same knocks, same remarks, just recycled. There'd be a new home, better or worse than the last, a new school, friends to make, and a new name to grow into, memorised to get it right on textbooks. Mum would wait at new school gates, never quite fitting in, but trying. Once a policeman picking up children laughed, said he almost didn't recognise her with her clothes on. And when she said, "Not in front of my girls," I knew we'd be moving on again. We were always running away from something. And I'm keeping a wary eye on my clock, and I can squeeze just one more poem in. I'm really quick. The next one is called The House of Lost Windows. It comes up with a quick dedication epigraph at the beginning, which is, "Inside the box is a large tear, collected a drip at a time from the children in his care." And that's from Joel Taylor. The poem is called, in this part of the sequence, Okokola Koroi, which means a doll's house. The last children's home I'm sent to hides beneath a suburban veneer. It houses back of the class girls, small-time dealers, abandoned teens with no options, and gangs of yo-yo visitors. The house mother sits in a pristine office shuffling papers, lectures about the ills of fags and permed hair. Her head nods a mass of koyam matting. She mimics mothering sounds, chirps about the expense of feeding her succession of pubescent cuckoos. Bitchy girls call newbies fresh meat when they try the locked windows. As a welcome, the Godfather likes you to sit on his lap and call him Daddy. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. That was wonderful, as we knew it would be. Really, really moving poems. At the end, can I just, Peter's going to introduce John Miller in a moment, but can I just remind you that at the end we'll have a few questions if you want to be thinking of something that you'd like to ask, and send it in chat. That would be really good, and we'll have a look through those at the end and relay them to the writers. But now we have John Miller coming up.
Yeah, it's nice to see John. I'm going to mention while I think of it, John, that also while you're doing the chat thing, you'll see there's a code to get free postage if you decide to buy the collections, which we hope you will. And many of you already have them, of course, but yeah, they're the perfect gift. And John Miller, I happen to know that John is an extremely good musician, and that it informs his writing, the musicality of his writing, despite the fact that his poems are so full of real things, and often surreal or hyper-real things. He lives in Ullapool in the Scottish Highlands, and in fact, at one time was an editor of Northwards Now, a magazine featuring writing from the north of Scotland. He was shortlisted for the Wigton Poetry Prize in 2021, and in the same year that he won this prize, he won joint first place in the Neil Gunn Poetry Competition. And I noticed that Donnie O'Rourke has talked about poetry that's true to life in its capacity to touch, console, and terrify. These theatrical vignettes blend the absurd with the plaisancies and pleasures of alert existence. And he talks about welcoming us to John Miller's worlds. Jonathan Edwards and Romelin Ante both felt that this collection compels from its first poem and announces an outstanding talent. So you don't need me to announce him, but here he is, John Miller.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being in. I don't know if you, well, up here it's lovely weather, so you'd be forgiven for being outside, bronzing yourself on a sun lounger and having a drink. But we're all here. So I thought I would I'd start the reading with the first poem in the collection, a poem called Eyes, and partly because it's the first poem, but also partly because it's a poem that appeared in one of Peter and Anne's workshops, probably 70–80% as it appears in the collection. But it's a kind of tribute to the work that they do and kind of continue to do. So, Eyes. That morning on the beach, the first man to swim round the world arrived back. No one was there to greet him. All those who waved him off had died. News at 10, social media algorithms had all got bored and moved on. And anyway, it was assumed he had drowned in the Sargasso Sea. Which was a shame, because he rode in on the backs of dolphins, manta rays as outriders, pale, smooth-skinned, hairless, having regrown gills and webbed feet, barnacles, anemones and bladderwrack hanging from his back, so that when he slopped unsteadily through the streets of the town under midnight stars, it was as if some creature from a B-movie had come ashore, and that's when the screams began and spread from house to house, and out they came with flaming torches, billhooks and pitchforks, and drove him back down to the harbour and into the sea, where you can see him to this day, eyes on the waterline. But you'll have to imagine his sadness, because, like all sea creatures, he cannot weep. The next poem, I thought I'd try and break the attempt, the record for Christmas coming early. And this poem is called Nativity, and it is just about those scenes that you see in churches and shopping centres round about Christmas. Nativity. Straw lies about as if someone has detonated a scarecrow. Miscellaneous barnyard animals position themselves appropriately, strangely prescient of shopping mall displays across the Western world. A cockerel struts and stares and stares and struts. Sheep work typewriters in their heads. The few cows are many tons of bored incomprehension. Shepherds, full of sheep reek and field sleep, hum in their hive of odours as if a fank had overflowed. The magi examine their cuticles, compose guzzles, wish for the tiled steam rooms of Jerusalem, their slaves, their concubines, as the rich do everywhere. Cherubim with bulbous cheeks festoon the rafters, bob about like party balloons, wearing faces you just want to punch. Mary, in the movie of herself, waves her hands over the infant, cleansing the air of some celestial afterbirth, with the instinct of a mother protecting her child from its father. Joseph leans on his crook, has his doubts. The world is in a fit of FOMO. The infant, like all of them, doesn't know where he started. Next poem, which is called it's called Retail Park, and it's about those kind of bleak deserts of capitalism that people can frequent at weekends on Sundays and Saturdays, hunting out wallpaper, lampshades, and where all the shop assistants seem to be experts on matching paint pots or grout or something. So, Retail Park. Here is where the city frays at the edges to low-rise warehouses, panting forecourts, breakers' yards, car showrooms, cathedrals of DIY. On the horizon, a parade of glinting towers. We are far from there in our pallid weekend sun. Here, the compass has failed, and we approach, unsure of our bearings among verges, flags, uppercase signage, flailing air puppets, peering into empty depths of garages and timber yards. That forklift and cement mixer are archaeological. Those stacked pallets home to ants, and not a single fire surround was sold today. Here, the material world, modular, flat packed. Here, the hot gospelers of the respray, custodians of filler and stripper, tiles, kitchen and carpet. But watch, as you approach those glass doors, how they slide apart, steal your reflection the moment you step inside. Next poem is called Mayday, and it came to mind while I was looking through poems for the reading. I'm currently reading the Scottish poet Michael Paterson's memoir of his friendship with Scott Hutchison, the lead singer-songwriter of the band Frightened Rabbit, who committed suicide by jumping off, well, they believe he jumped off the Forth Road Bridge. And Michael Paterson's book, Boyfriends, which kind of looks at male friendship, tragedy, mental health, seemed to echo when I was looking for poems. So I thought I would read this one. It's a bit longer, but it seemed to chime with some of the things I've been thinking about in relation to Michael Paterson's book. So this is Mayday. We both knew the head's black clag, the weight swung under the heart, the breath that couldn't climb the stairs out of our chests. You'd trained your black lab, Mayday, to run off, loved calling it, watching the neighbours panic, startled from forking the lawn, dead-heading roses. Istanbul? But I had that taxidermy job, and you were gluing your matchstick bust of Rambo to fire up for your perfect dinner party guests. Dinnerval with his lobster and rope, Mayakovsky loading his pistol, Wolf soaking wet, Plath reeking of gas. You checked out that freighter bound for Tuvalu, crewed by Nigerians and Vietnamese. Bliss to not know what they said, not to understand anything for a while. Then spent days on Google Earth, turning the planet till it was nothing but endless Pacific. Atolls floating like dead cells in God's eye. So, that day your buzzer didn't work. Blinds down, pigeons hungry on your windowsill. Amazon packages, Estonian poets, Sufi mystics, clogging the storm door. Even the old woman across the landing who'd hated you ever since you polka-dotted her shih tzu bit her lip. And when the police unlocked your phone, you'd filmed yourself, naked, junk shop angel's wings buckled to your back, running the way a child does, full speed, laughing into the exploding sea, a shroud of surf bursting over you. It's a story I tell lonely divorcees late night in bars and bedsits, hoping to stay. Told it so many times, I'm not even sure it's true anymore. Or maybe I'm just filling in my own vague outline, waiting for rescue, firing these flares from the sofa, this lifeboat held out in my palm. Okay, here's a couple of poems about where I live, which, as Peter mentioned, was up at Ullapool, which is the northwest Highlands of Scotland, the kind of top left-hand corner of Scotland, and it's where you get the ferry over to the Outer Isles, Outer Hebrides. And this poem concerns kind of tourism, that boom that is currently going on in Ullapool, the kind of mass industrial tourism that's happening, which is turning this small village of 1,500, 2,000 people into somewhere like the Lake District or Cornwall, and the place can't cope, really, and it's leading to increasing frustration, not least amongst myself, about what's happening to the place. This is called a Greek chorus at the close of the tourist season. And if you do happen to be visiting the Northwest Highlands of Scotland, this is not personal. Don't worry, it's not personal. A Greek chorus at the close of the tourist season. This year's crop is on the promenade. Their meat hangs loose under slogans. They amble camel-hoofed in sandals. Their hair ripples in the pastures. They are dazed by tepid pleasures. They sniff the air like blank dogs. They have brought their naked legs and parade them as best in show. Their heartbeats are barely audible. They have eaten of the fruit of the brainless tree. They blunder, weightless as helium buffaloes. We tie them to railings in strong breezes. We cargo them, pack their husks in ticking rooms of murderous tidiness. We lay them on mattresses that hold the warmth of octogenarian sex. We plant them on the golf course. We stuff them in wardrobes, stair cupboards, chimneys, sheds, lay them by for winter. We polish our sky each day. We pat our hills into place. We fluff up our forests. Next year, we will take their heads from the shelf, dust them down, rouse them with trumpets, bacon, eggs. Okay, and the final poem is, again, well, I mentioned we're up in Ullapool, and that's where you get the ferry out to the Outer Hebrides. So that journey takes about 2.5 hours. And when you go on board the ferry, you can sit outside on the decks, or you can go up to the observation lounge, which is where this poem takes place. And you can basically sit there and just gaze at the sea and the horizon as you kind of say farewell and arrive at the same time. So this poem is set up in the observation lounge of the ferry, and the kind of very peaceful atmosphere that's in there. So it's this way to the observation lounge. Out through the placid archipelagos they go, at ease in their daylit aquarium, moving over the water at the pace of a slow car. The sea is flat on its back. The flag barely mutters at the mast. All are hypnotized by empty sea and sky, by the line where nothing meets. They have left the world to turn without them and sit with hands clasped in laps, as if listening to a sermon on vacancy. Asleep, they twitch to escape their clothes. They know themselves the way the blind feel what they cannot see. I could tuck in chins, settle a head on its neck, retrieve dropped novels, while their eyes read dreams, the way an unborn child pushes against its mother's belly. They are at rest. Someone is on the bridge. Over the horizon is harbour. Weather is busy somewhere else, who they are has fallen away like rain over islands. That's it. Thanks very much.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And really, what's great hearing them again is the depth. I mean, they're surprising images, but the way they have a depth that kind of feeds into the whole of the meaning of the poem. It's really remarkable how that's done.
Yeah, thank you, John, very much. Right now, we're going to introduce this collection by Zoe Walkington. I hate to be the one to tell you this, which we know when people say that, they don't hate telling you it, they can't wait. But I'll tell you something briefly about Zoe. She lives with her whippets in Woburn Sands in Bedfordshire. She's a professor of psychology at the Open University, specialising in the psychology of police investigations. She regularly advises the police on interviewing suspects and acts as an academic advisor to the BBC on factual crime content. Jonathan Edwards says, this introduces a powerful and distinctive voice. This writing really excites. And Romelin Anti said, Zoe Walkington's voice is strikingly unique, but there are also moments when it seems to be coming from within us, from a place of personal wonder. I just finished by saying that in a review in the PBS Summer Bulletin, Zoe's writing was described as riotous and truly irresistible, which is worth getting a tattoo done for, I think.
Already done it, Anne, already done it. Thank you. I'm going to start off with a poem called Imagine. Imagine bringing your mistress home to meet the family. The low thump of the car doors, the footsteps left behind her shoes and your shoes on the drive. The shock on your wife's face. Her mouth, which for 3 years you've only seen as a line, hangs open in a soft O. Your kids not daring to whisper to each other, what's a mistress? Their legs and arms twining in perpetual motion. Your mistress, you notice, wears a handbag over her forearm as if she were carrying a basket of eggs. She holds your wife's gaze, smooths the crease in her pencil skirt. In the silence, she sniffs, looks the curtains up and down. Quite a lot of the poems that I'm going to read tonight are themed around water, which a bit ironic because we don't seem to have enough of it at the moment. And this first poem is about fishing. Gone fishing. Maybe I'm thinking too much, but when you tell me you're going fishing, I don't believe you. You've put a green coat on, I'll give you that, and Wellingtons. Otherwise, you're dressed as always, sharply. Your chosen bait, the warm cedar tang of Tom Ford. In your car boot, I don't doubt, your smart shoes. The only fishing permit obtained, a reservation for 2 at Paris House. Still, I nod and say, have a nice time. I hope you catch something. Washing up, I picture you louche and languid. Did you create the right impression? Or did, during dessert, live fish start to fall from the ceiling? Perch, roach, salmon and trout flapping wetly and horribly on your table, each cold eye looking at nothing. And to continue the theme of rivers and those sorts of places, the next poem that I'm going to read is about taking on some ducks as members of your family. Ducks. At first, they're always under my feet, peeping and following as I move from dishwasher to table and back. They gulp down the grubs and earthworms that I catch after heavy rain, cutlery fork in hand, glasses on, standing on one leg like a heron on the lawn. Back inside, they circle my feet, peep as loud as tiny whistles. The two bravest peck at my socks with their bills. I toss worm after worm, grub after grub, and overnight each duckling's outline expands as if traced over by a thick pen. In a week, they've doubled in size, and soon they outgrow the washing up bowl, one always popping over onto the side. I move the coffee table and inflate a paddling pool between my sofas, filling it with bucket after bucket from the cold tap. The ducklings bob and splash their content. Before long, the harvest from the back garden is not enough, and I mine the rockery at the front. The neighbours become inquisitive, and I fret the double glazing will betray me, the peeps turning into braying quacks. I become pale. Aldi seems a long way away, and besides, the grubs aren't so bad. Catching myself in the mirror one day, I brush soil from the corners of my mouth. My lips harden and crack. When the paddling pool develops a tear, I put the plug in the sink, move the dishcloth to the granite island, turn the tap on and wait. Flooding the floor takes 3 hours. Within a day, the electrics blow. We leak surprisingly little, top up just once a day. Nights are the best. We roost on the granite island caked with poo, our breath one rhythm, our feathers puffed. The two drakes lie awake longer than the rest, perched on the knife block, blinking into the night. Okay, and another place that has a lot of water is Whitby, and Whitby's a coastal town on the northeast coast. And if you've ever been to Whitby and looked up, you might have noticed that on top of one of the shops, there's an enormous polar bear. I think he's made out of fiberglass. And this poem was inspired by that bear. Whitby. You waited near the harbour 3 long weeks that winter. Finally, the ship sailed in, and from it lumbered a polar bear, slow and grubby from the trip. I watched him greet you, rubbing his huge head over your slim body, your thin arms wriggling into his slack fur, which, like in the stories, was torn. And through the tear, I saw not golden threads, but denim. And I knew then there was a man inside the bear, a financial insolvent from an online dating site who one day would discard his yellowed fur in the backyard next to the old mattress. Now and then he would clout you with his paw, but mostly it would be more ordinary than that. Mostly it would be you and him, and maybe a little bear sat at a formica table eating porridge, you with one eye on the harbour, looking at the ships. And during lockdown, I lived on my own, and the bit before we were allowed to have the bubble concept was really quite lonely. And I think it was about 2 months or something where I didn't have any physical contact with another human being. Thank God for my dogs during that time. But there was one place I discovered locally that it was government sanctioned that I was allowed to go. And I started to find myself really looking forward to the visits to this particular place. It's called Werburn Sands Hand Car Wash and Valeting. There are 5 of them. 1 tells me when to pull forward, 2 squirt me with suds and get flanneling. The 4x4 rocks as they go up onto my wheel tops for the roof, their trousers pressed against the windows on both sides. They don't seem as excited as me. I have to stop myself shouting, yes, yes, yes. They sluice me down. Under instruction, I drive just 10 metres forward, then all 5 are on me with the chamois leathers, all talking to each other, sucking up my water and dirt, as if it happens every day to have men pressed up against windows, making the car jiggle and bob. Yeah, difficult times. Anyone who's seen my car will find that poem even more ridiculous, because my car's always absolutely filthy and has got bits hanging off it and is held together currently using duct tape. This poem doesn't mention water at all. It's about a place that a lot of us that write poetry love, which is Heptonstall. And the reason we love Heptonstall is that Lumbank is there, which is one of the Arvon writing centres. So a lot of people go there for like writing retreats and things like that. And this is about somebody that used to work in Heptonstall. It's called The Last Psychic in Heptonstall. I am the last psychic in Heptonstall, my occupation now made derelict by the advent of the internet. People are catching on that my portents regarding the length of journeys they're about to take are often significantly erroneous. Somewhere near Halifax, a bloke named Barry is keeping a spreadsheet of my failed predictions, such as the fact that his grandmother, who in 2018 I said was trying to get a message to him from the other side, was actually buying licorice in the pound shop at the time. Also, he's noticed that my health-related predictions, i.e. that a person will either get better or get worse before getting better, can only turn out to be false in clients who subsequently die. Barry says it's people like them, the vulnerable, dead ones, that he needs to speak for. And I'm going to finish on another poem that has a theme of water. And this is a poem kind of about when water goes wrong, really. And it's called You Bend. My plumber swears his flexibility is such that he's able to fold himself into a standard oven cavity, providing you remove all the shelves. I've met men like him before who, on receipt of 2 sugars in the tea, are prone to overblown claims like that they're Elvis or they can undo a button using only their tongue. I remove each metal shelf one by one, never once breaking eye contact, expecting him to crack under the pressure. Instead, he sets down his tea and begins an elaborate routine of stretches and bends, working his muscles slack, mixing in some high-intensity drills like a footballer. I stand in my kitchen, watching him do high kicks, groin stretches, and at one point I swear an old school crab. I think of the bowerbirds of South America as he dislocates each hip in preparation. Ready? I inquire, one eyebrow cocked. He tells me he was born ready and commences his contortions for real. Arse first, he pursed himself in backwards, unjointing first his left knee, then the right, to fold them yogically in front of himself. His feet, he ratchets round like a faulty handbrake. The first arm is an easy retraction, the second more challenging. And I think of commuters at Stockport Station folding their Bromptons with a satisfying clunk as he uses his last free hand to twist his head into place. Whilst it's hard for him to speak now, he is able to manage a muffled ta-da. To be fair, I am impressed, but say nothing. Shut the door, turn the dial to 200. Thank you.
Oh, God. Yes. Thank you, Zoe, very much. Yes. I think there's, that's just a fraction of the things that Zoe hates to tell us, but and I highly recommend the rest of them. And now, finally.
Now here's Luke Samuel Yates. Luke is different to the other three in that he's a previous winner of the Poetry Business Book and Pamphlet Competition. 2014, I had to look it up. I couldn't believe it was so long ago. The then American poet laureate Billy Collins was the judge. And he chose Luke as one of the winners then. And a collection called The Flemish Primitives was published. And so we thought rather than do another pamphlet, Luke's already had a pamphlet from the Rialto as well as that one from us. So we brought out this rather splendid dynamo collection of a whole book full of Luke's wonderful. What poems that Jane Draycott talks about Luke's distinctly European sensibility, dreamlike, playful, seriously in pursuit of something. Luke Kennard says this is a poet who can take the deceptively effortless, witty, yet ultimately serious chops of the New York school and make it work for this generation and bring the whole thing into land, just outside a British city, leaving nothing in transit. Luke lives in northwest England. He's published those pamphlets, as I say, was a poetry society for young poets on 4 occasions, and he lectures in sociology at Manchester. He teaches and researches around political movements, technology, and consumption practices, which is exactly what his poems deal with, I think. Also, human relationships, and it's fantastic. It's such a pleasure, Luke, to be. I want to remind people to be sorting out some questions, for the chat afterwards. Brilliant. On behalf of everybody, thank you, everybody. And here is Luke Samuel Yates.
Thanks, Peter, yeah, thanks everyone for coming. I can't see you, but yeah, I hope you're having a nice Sunday wherever you are. I'm more black and white than I usually am tonight, and I'm not really sure why it is, but it's not a pretentious filter. It's just what my camera's doing tonight. So yeah, but there's not a lot of colour going on anyway that you're missing. So yeah, I'm going to start with a poem called Going Somewhere that's about bees. The engine gave out when we reached the top. We were on a bee road going over the moors. Horses grazing on their shadows off west, and in the other direction, turbines gesturing like air traffic controllers. You walked down the road for a signal. Mum stayed in the passenger seat with the door open, drinking tiny sips of water. Flies kept landing on her hands and hair. I wanted to brush them away, but didn't want to startle her. Some way off you found it and called me over. A swarm the size of a cantaloupe melon, clinging to the trunk of a hawthorn. A ball of bees, chocolate and khaki, barely moving, but all pointing in the same direction. A planet of traffic jams, going somewhere, but also not going anywhere. We watched as some left and others arrived, ignoring us, figuring out what to do next. If only we could work together to get out of this fix. you said, when we were back on the road, back on the motorway, with all the other people in their cars. This the second one is called Snorkeling, and I've always liked the idea that if you pick up a shell that you can hear, even if you're in a shop, you can hear the seashore that it came from, and you can hear the waves kind of crashing against that shore. And the poem imagines what shells hear when we do that, and whether shells can hear where we're from too. So it's called Snorkeling. I was on the beach, you were on the beach. The sea was half on, half off the beach. You filled a bucket with the shells we found, pressed yourself to the ear of each in turn, and they heard your city, impatient and ceaseless. And you walking through it in your sunglasses and baseball cap, snorkeling through the shopping malls, the department store china set displays, and mannequin models listing in their underwear. The crowd swirling around you in unrepeatable patterns of desire, more complex than a vitamin B complex, more complex than a military-industrial complex, more complex than Complex, the magazine for men, music, girls, style, entertainment, sneakers, technology. And you put out your arms in front of you, but do not touch anybody, and nobody touches you. They were always already leaving a space around you, a space of you, thus the extra they call personal space, around the bit that they call your place in society. We're getting in the car as the rain starts to fall. We'll keep the shells in a bucket outside the back door. I think I'm going to read this one. I've been kind of making my mind up what around what I would read while listening to the other poets, which is a sort of bad way of doing it. But it's nice to sometimes for there to be some kind of relationship between the poems that are being read by different poets. And I wanted to do something about a British seaside town following Zoe and John's poems. So this one is about visiting Blackpool, and it's about visiting Blackpool for an anti-fascist demonstration. It's called Stopping the White Man March. The last time I was in Blackpool, we went to a demonstration against something called the White Man March. We took a coach from outside a park and went to the wrong pub on the seafront. Then, kettled next to some flood defences, we watched a police van reverse into a bollard. We managed to get chips, and although we mainly just stood around in the wind, we stopped the march. It was at least as good as any other time I've been to Blackpool. I remember the white men in front of a souvenir shop, their arms outstretched as though releasing birds in a romantic music video, and one forced back by the police line, falling into a stand of fridge magnets. I'm going to read the title poem of the collection, Dynamo, and a friend of mine who's a bike mechanic asked me the other day in a slightly accusatory tone, so why is it called Dynamo? And I started telling him that it was about movement and power and light, and he his face just glazed over. But there's and then I said there's a dynamo in it. There's a dynamo in one of the poems, and he sort of looked like reassured by that. So I'll read it. On the way back from the shops, where I had purchased some essentials and a luxury, I saw a line of seals loafing on the beach, the sea crashing and foaming, and the seals, unconcerned, shifting slightly in the waves, crumbs on a talking man's lip. My phone rang. It was Martha telling me to put the oven on when I got home so we could have potatoes, which to me didn't make sense because we have a fan-assisted oven. But I said yes, that I loved her. She said she loved me. I said goodbye. She said goodbye, that she loved me. I loved her. I said goodbye, bye, 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 bye. At the garden gate, a couple of bikes were locked on either side. Their lights were on. They were dynamo lights that were working off the movement of the Earth in space. Like me, I thought, picking up the post, which was just junk mail from broadband and satellite TV providers. I got back and turned on the oven, looked at the clock, adjusted my expectations, opened the window and looked out. Across the yard, in one of the houses opposite, a woman sat in the window talking to another person out of sight. The round blue box that was always there on the windowsill was now in front of her, between them, like a Ouija board, or more likely, a tin of children over which they were busily establishing ownership. So I've got the kind of the theme of movement in the collection, I guess is kind of literal, but it's also plays out through the kind of relationships that play out in the book, and I want to read a few of those which are kind of in the third part of the book. Sometimes kind of refracted through work, and that's the case with this one, which is called Getting to Travel a Lot with Your Job. The swimming pool at the top of the hotel is inert, the water as still as a desert. If I was with you, we'd go in. I would dive like a spoon, then join you in the steam room. You look out over the town, steep pitched roofs covered in snow, napkins in a cafe that you don't know. You return on Sunday. I feel like you're wearing or doing something new. I find you in the big glass atrium, kiss you between the bit where they check your ticket and where they sell you a baguette, the edge of your eye. I lump your bag into the car and you get in, and we both sit there in the dark for the moment before I find the ignition. Take me home, you say, in a voice tired as much of coming back as being away. And this one's about a can opener that doesn't work. It's called Can't. When she goes into that silence, he feels like the can opener that rides around the edge of the can without opening it in any way. She could be a can of cool coconut milk. She could be a can of plum tomatoes. He is meant to be making a curry, settled and progressing in his career. She is a can of implacable butter beans. All kinds of possibilities are slipping away. This one starts off about pineapples and then sort of continues this theme that I've been running with. It's called Done Up by the Landlord. The pineapple plant displays its pineapple like a trophy it has won for having grown a pineapple. It suspends it meaningfully as a man holds a ball he is about to throw for a dog that is so enthusiastic about the ball, it has forgotten what it is and everything else, if it ever knew anything at all. She says, did you know pineapples were once so celebrated that your servant would wheel one out to display at colonial era dinner parties? Now they are 99p in Lidl, and your mum can buy you one in plant format. We have a cup of tea. A new place is nice. It's only just been done up by the landlord, but he might have cut some corners. Damp, green shapes form on the floor. She vacuums the green off, but it comes back. I drive home in a ball of thought. She's over there now, and now I'm over here. I run in the park and look up at the trees. I feel my heart pushing the blood around. Suddenly, 2 years have passed. How have you been? I ask her. Oh, you know, she says. This is the last one that I'll read. It's called Song About Putting a Bird in a Pie, and it is about living your life according to the advice that comes on the little tags that are attached to some herbal tea bags. with little aphorisms and phrases on them. So I think that's what you need to know to understand the poem. A relaxed mind is a creative mind, says my inspiring teabag. Yours advises to empty yourself and let the universe fill you. We pick up the empty flower pot on the road, and a man in a dressing gown eating tomatoes leans out of a window and demands that we put it back. I ask him if it's his pot. Put it back, he shouts. Put it back. Each smile is a direct achievement, I remind him. He replies that gratitude is the open door to abundance. We carry on walking. We get onto the future. When should we panic? Reading the tea leaves, you say that happiness arrives when we overcome the most impossible challenge. Your bag has exploded. You look at things in such a way that you are not distracted by being looked at, looking at things. The blackbird sings a phrase, then repeats it, like a monolinguist talking to a foreigner. You can't believe anybody would even write a song about putting a bird in a pie. The man from the takeaway under my flat has climbed into his bin to compress the rubbish in order to fit more in. He walks from one side to the other, then back again, like an animal trapped in the hospitality industry. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, completely unexpected. Although I know the poems quite well now, because we took us a while to edit them, didn't it? To choose the right ones. I mean, and they're rich, and they could have been going, I suppose, in different directions, but because they all are different. But they make the book is more than the sum of its parts, is what I'm trying to say. And I say this, Luke, partly just to say something, because it's a wonderful read, but they're all wonderful readings, but partly to express one of the questions. If there are other questions, I hope they'll come up in our chat, which was about the editing process and choosing if all the poets want to come back and join us.
Okay. Choosing
the poems. And what's the oldest poem, would you say, in your collection, Karen? I sprung this on you. You've no idea, have you?
No, I think most of them were done during writing my MA, and a couple were newer because I sort of, it gelled a lot more after I set it aside and read it through and thought, oh, that's done. As soon as you do that, you suddenly get that feeling, aha, no, it's not. I have something I want to say. So some were really new, but yeah, I think most of them were written about 3 years ago. It would have been now. I started the MA.
Yeah.
Okay.
So shall we go around? Ask John.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just having a look. Possibly Nativity, which I think was a Whitby weekend, a Whitby week, whatever it was, way back when I was at. That was maybe the start of it was back there somewhere, I think. So I don't know how long ago that is, but it's a few years.
Yeah, it was that week before Christmas when we used to do a course up in the convent in Whitby.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You can be forgiven for doing a nativity poem.
But that was a few years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
A while. I should say that the competition is anonymous and
international.
And international, yeah. There were last year, like this one, there were poets from Australia and India, America, in fact, Maya's collection.
Yeah, quite a few from them.
Anyway, and of course Romlin and well, we didn't recognise most of the people. We didn't know Karen's work at all, and Romlin and Jonathan didn't know who they are. So they're just good readers, aren't they? Yeah. Zoe, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I had a couple in there, like the Ducks one that I read out today. I think that's quite old. I think that must be like maybe 6 years old or something like that. So I had a couple that were from like legacy poems, I suppose. And then at the kind of other end of the spectrum, I had a couple that I shoehorned in literally at the 11th hour. You know, so it was a range really. I'd say most of them were written sort of post, you know, during or after the lockdown, but there definitely are a few that were older.
Yeah, because there's a Happy Valley one, and there's the other one when just in the news about people forcing their way in and making people have free payment meters.
Yeah, the utility breed one and the Happy Valley one were literally they were shoehorned in sort of during the editing process.
Yeah.
So just when you think you're done, you know, you suddenly realise that you've got 2 poems to get rid of and 2 new ones to put in.
Yeah.
Luke?
There's a couple from my first pamphlet that was a pair of scissors that could cut anything, that I guess were written 2009 to 2011, or yeah, maybe even before then. And yeah, I guess the pair of scissors that could cut anything, I think it was actually one that I wrote in one of these, the April kind of write 30 poems in a month thing, and it was the only one that was any good. But I guess it was yeah, it ended up being the title of the first pamphlet, so it was worth kind of plowing through writing this terrible stuff for the rest of the month to get there.
We have a question from Maggie Reed. She says it's a fabulous evening. And her question to all the poets is, who is their current favourite poet?
Present company accepted.
Yeah. Please do.
I've got an answer.
Yeah.
So present company accepted. My favourite poet at the moment is Paul Stevenson, because I've just read Hard Drive, which is a collection that he's got out at the moment, and it's quite new, and I just thought it was absolutely fantastic. One of those where you sit down and you read from cover to cover in one sitting.
Wow, and it's a big book.
It is.
It's fantastic.
I've got a lot of time on my hands.
Karen?
Yeah, Kim Moore. I started with one book and then bought another. I'm sort of following her through backwards now, through all the things I can find that she's written. Some are tough reads, but really wonderful. And even bought one that you've produced by her, and it was the trumpet book, because my partner plays trumpet, and I thought, if nothing else, he might read this. Who knows?
This is Stephen, who you throw tassels at.
Yeah.
It is. Yes.
She, of course, won our competition back in the day with her Wolves pamphlet. But this book, the book that you're talking about, is What the Trumpet Taught Me. And it's a fantastic, it's little prose pieces, isn't it? A memoir about being a trumpet teacher and then becoming a musician, trumpet musician in a soul band.
John, of course, is a musician. If anyone can ever catch him with his band, the Lapsed Satanists, I find particularly good. They sometimes have a guest singer who I won't name at this point, but they, but the Lapsed Satanists, they're well worth travelling to see.
What is your band really called, John?
Sorry?
What's your band really called?
There's one band I'm in called Experiment.
Experiment.
It is literally that. It's a combination of jazz, fusion, soul, funk, whatever. We don't really know. So it's that. Plus everything else. Plus angular punk, whatever. I don't know. It's all self-written stuff. It's all good. It's all good. Yeah, they're good. 7-piece.
Which poet?
Which poet? Mary Ruffle. Is that how you pronounce her second name? I've got her selected poems and I just can't stop reading it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's all in that kind of James Tate, Charles Simic kind of area that I really like, and it's just fantastic, just fantastic.
Yeah, great. And Luke?
Yeah, I'm reading a pamphlet by a poet from Leeds called Tom Crumpton, who has at least one pamphlet out, and the pamphlet's great. And he's kind of writing stuff that's a bit like, yeah, like Maggie O'Sullivan or something like this. He's a really great reader, and runs a project called I think it's called the Poets Hardship Fund, which kind of gives it's kind of like a mutual aid scheme that gives support to writers. So people might want to check that out as well. The Poets Hardship Fund, a really good initiative. But yeah, Tom Crumpton, I recommend his stuff.
Fantastic. I hope this time for one more question, because Michelle O'Connell asks, how many edits on average do you make to your poems? Do you leave them in a drawer and come back to them? Yeah.
Well, I'll go first. I'm notorious. I love the process of editing. I think most people hate it. I love it. I do leave them if I can, but I'm doing a PhD at the moment, and as everyone knows that's done one, you find yourself having to work to a deadline and putting things in, and then you think, oh, I could have done better. But I love it. I will spend sometimes years. I'll go back to a poem thinking, I think I wrote something in that book. I'll filter through, and because I'm dyslexic, I draw little pictures which are really bad, just so that I can flick really quickly and find the poem, and then I'll edit. And even if it's just one line that I've saved out of the whole poem, I think, right, okay, well, I'll work around that. So yeah, ages. I never stop, even when it's printed up. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It's not Holy Writ, is it? Once it's
Holy
in print,
Writ.
it's not.
No.
No, you can still change stuff. It's yours. Yeah. What about you, Zoe?
I think I'm not very good at editing. And in fact, Peter likes to say it'd be better if I didn't edit them, if I didn't edit them at all, because I tend to ruin them. But I do think I'm getting a bit...
I think Anne agrees.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm
sorry,
sorry.
it's not just one person.
I don't give you the option.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As soon as it's written, get it out of my hands. Yeah, I don't enjoy editing. I am the polar opposite to Karen. It's not a process that I enjoy. I do think I've got a little bit better at it recently, but it's certainly not a skill set I yet consider myself to have developed, but I hope to develop it kind of as I progress.
Yeah, that's nice, that balance,
yeah.
Karen and Zoe. John and Luke. John, what do you think?
It usually takes a good while, and I like to leave things until I'm a slightly different person for a period of time, and then come back to them and see what that person thinks of what the other person wrote, and change things bit by bit. So it's a process of marinating and settling slowly over the period of time, I think. That's probably and keep going back to it and changing bits and pieces, and then eventually it's done, and there's nothing else nothing else with which I can breathe life into it. Can't give it the kiss of life anymore. It's just going to have to be as it is.
Yeah.
Marinating is a really interesting way of putting it.
Yeah, it is.
And I know I heard Luke say once about composting, that the poems have to have time to compost. Do you stand by that compost, Luke?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if I ever feel like they're completely finished. So the kind of publishing is good for that, isn't it? Because it forces you to just to capture that kind of instance and live with it. But I was editing one of the poems that I was almost going to read while I was while I was thinking about what I was going to read today. So it does just carry on going for me, which is kind of exhausting. But it also means that you discover and suddenly kind of you get something that you were trying to write for years and suddenly feel kind of confident about it. So I run through like very small edits, like sporadically, and then bigger edits, and I kind of save them all at the bottom of a long kind of Word document. So if I made a terrible mistake, then I sometimes notice and can go back to a previous version.
Yes. And also when you're reading, you know, I think a lot of people just edit as they're going along, because once you're saying it out loud to an audience, you know, if you get a bit fed up halfway along a line, it's probably too long.
Well, it
So
does
just lop it off.
brings it home. doesn't it?
Yeah, or you know, you can do that, can't you? On the hoof, most people.
Well, I think it's fair to say that there may be still alive in the sense of they may want to change, but the poems, you know, fantastic just as they are, aren't they? And as it happens in these collections, you know, and they are available for purchase.
Yeah.
And free postage if you get that code. Wonderful. It was a really great evening. The 4 marvelous readings, as we knew they would be. We'll let you know, everybody in the audience, we'll let you know when other readings are happening, as they will do. We'll try and send through, we'll pass on when people have got readings at various festivals and so on. I can't resist saying that it was a unique year. This every year is good. We're so pleased that Romlin and Jonathan chose these 4 poets.
Yeah.
We did know 3 of them already. We feel as though we know Karen really well now, and she feels like one of our poets. And in fact, 2 of the poets who wrote about Karen's collection on her pamphlet.
Yeah, Ella Duffy and Sarah Wimbush also.
Well, we published them too.
So it's not sound like it's just a family thing, and it's not really, because we know you know, it's a lot far-reaching.
We know a lot of poets, and it's not surprising, I suppose, that but mostly we don't know the ones that have won, or we might know, and we're always amazed. But we were so pleased with the winners.
The variety of these
They're always good.
So we'll let you go away and collapse, and you know, just generally celebrate having got your readings finished for the evening. Okay, and thank you for everyone for listening as well.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Don't forget to write that post-it. I'm really mad keen on these sales. I don't mind. It's wonderful, really. Thank you, everybody.